Hello, James. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm super excited to talk to you. We like to hop straight into it. So I'm going to hop straight into it. And the people, as they're listening, can understand who you are and your awesome, awesome, awesome experience. So before we get started, I want to understand what type of role did you have? What was the size of the organization you were leading? How many developers, how many platform engineers? And the reason I always like to start with that is because I have these roundtable discussions all the time. And pretty frequently, you'll hear someone saying some really interesting advice and you go chat to them and they're like, oh, yeah, we have, 5 developers as our customer and I'm the one platform engineer. I'm like, okay, very different perspective and maybe not so useful. So let's start right there. What type of role
Sure.
did you have and take it
Yep.
away?
So I'm James Marcus. I was focused on mainly DevOps in my current role, but we have several hundred engineers spread out across the world, and we saw the need for a platform. We had traditionally been focused in automation with Terraform and Ansible for configuration management, tooling like that. And as we saw our problems expand or our problem set expand, we looked for new ways of addressing developer friction.
And how many engineers did you have? How many, you know, how many people on the platform team? How many customers were you serving?
Sure. So initially, we had about 300 engineers. And then from the perspective of serving, well, on my team, we look at everyone as a customer. So it's a little bit infinite from the customer perspective, but we have our actual customers who are paying money, in which we use the platform to deploy to our clients. And then we have our internal customers that expand, that originally just started as anyone who was using the platform,
Mm.
but it expanded out to an initial broader rollout at the company of 25,000 engineers.
Yeah, so we're not talking here about a nice cute startup with 10 people using it. This is pretty beefy. I mean, I think really based on my conversations, one of the largest platforms I've heard about really, um, which is why I wanted to obviously get you on here pretty much as soon as possible. Now,
Sure.
one thing that really we have to cover, I have a lot of conversations about platform engineering. I talk to people all the time, and the conversations can get a little bit repetitive. Everyone's having the same problems. They're kind of struggling with the same things. Oh, people aren't treating it like a product. My engineers don't know user journeys. They don't care about the product management side. How are we convincing leadership for buy-in? How do we, convincing engineers to engage? And I remember kind of repeating this spiel to you in New York a couple of weeks ago, and you looked at me like, that's something people struggle with? And I was like, what? I was like, wow, I've met the man on the mount, the one guy who isn't struggling with it. So we got to zoom in on that. And what are you doing differently? Or what did you do
Sure.
differently?
Yeah. I mean, I find that this comes from my experience, really, even at university. I was a business major. I was going through the regular process of learning accounting and all of the things you do as a business major. And then I stumbled upon HR and I got so excited because it really seemed to be the path where you could listen to what was happening in an organization and build a framework to help support people uh, improve and enjoy their work and be more efficient. I quickly realized that actually HR is not what I want to do. I like technology. I had an account on the digital Unix server at college. I was super excited about Unix. But it really, this moment kind of in becoming an HR major and learning, how to interact with teams and how to understand each person's personality and how that affects the way they give you feedback or the way they do their work every day or what they find fulfilling is different. Um, but what I found fulfilling was diving in and understanding what was challenging in everyone's day to day work life. Being at one of the big four, we aren't really considered technology companies. And so as people come into the organization, they often feel a sense of frustration because the thing that they could do in industry or at a smaller company now takes upwards of 3 months to get
Hmm.
done. And they leave work every day feeling really frustrated. So, if you like, I can continue and kind of talk about my experience of how I got to a platform.
Well, please do.
Yeah. So I used to have this very noisy, beefy developer sitting behind me who's a bodybuilder and really into Python. He's a great guy. And every day I would hear him complain about something in infrastructure. We had taken the kind of role of infrastructure, DevOps, automation, and we'd really thought, okay, we're at this big firm. We see lots of people writing Terraform or writing automation, but not very well and not as a product. And so we have all of this waste all over the organization where we know as a team that we could write production grade Terraform using the grunt work framework and then make it an inner source project and share it more broadly and dramatically contribute to uh, margin of deployments, speed up our deployments, give customers uh, a great story around infrastructure and managing that with us instead of a custom solution each time. So we started working on that, and we always work on these goals with our developers to see what they need to get out of their way. Um, I find there's so much of that historical view of system administration where we had to keep developers off of systems for a long time in order to protect either production quality or what was going into production, or to prevent us being surprised, that we swung in a direction that wasn't helpful, right? We were making it too difficult to deploy software, too difficult to create a S3 bucket, or any number of things that makes a developer frustrated at the end of the day. We thought with Terraform, great. Now a developer can submit a pull request, we can review it, and we can make that change without them having to open a ticket or message us on Slack or do all of these different things. But the developers were still frustrated. What I came to realize was, I just shifted the problem to the developers. I had made them learn Terraform. I had made them understand our framework. And that was just overwhelming, right? It's
It's
not,
like, James, it's like I gave you a script of everything I want you to say. I
well, that's
promise
good.
he's not a paid
Yeah.
actor. I
Yeah.
promise. I didn't brief him ahead of time, everybody.
But yeah, when we met in New York and you were talking about this, I was so excited because these are the things we were thinking about, right? Like, it's one thing if a developer is really into Terraform and they want to keep working on it. It's another thing for a DevOps or a platform team to say, hey, this is the tool you're using. Sorry that it adds like 30% complexity to your day job. And so this developer sitting behind me was, banging his fist on the table, complaining about, creating this S3 bucket in a way that he didn't want to. And I sat there and kind of asked myself first, like, what am I missing here? I thought we had kind of gotten out of their way by at least giving them a chance to submit a pull request. Um, and my team had really been thinking about building a platform on Kubernetes. One broader business issue we had was as we went to market with productized solutions in the ad and marketing tech space, it still took weeks or months, often months, to stand up a proof of concept for a client. Now, we all know in startups or kind of mid-sized companies that shouldn't be the case, right? We should be able to write some automation Should be able to document that in a productized way so that CISOs and BISOs and engineers can all kind of understand it, understand the risk, see our thought behind it, and stand up a proof of concept very quickly so that we can all kind of move forward with the work and not make business solutions really about infrastructure challenges. And that's really the same kind of thought behind our platform, but for engineers. Right? It shouldn't be a surprise to anyone today. We use Argo CD, right? We refactored all sorts of our code versioning and connected Argo CD and created our artifacts so that a developer could start with this one thing. I checked in a line of code. I need to see this running in a production like infrastructure in a few minutes. And that started our journey because the feedback we got once we solved that initial problem was tremendous. And immediately, all of the engineers wanted to start to use
Mm.
this kind of
And I
system.
think, I mean, zooming in on exactly that. I mean, when I talk to people, we talk about this idea of platform as a product management, best practices, yada yada. I mean, they're great, not to say buzzwords, but they're great words. They're big words, and it can be hard for maybe someone who's more engineering minded or technical. Be like, well, I'm an infrastructure guy. Yes, I like platforms, I like the idea, but like, how do I even get started off this? And I think zooming in on exactly what you just said, what is the problem that you are solving? Break it down into a really kind of simple, clear problem. And then that is something that's much easier. And I think that's exactly where the differentiator I find between the super successful platforms that I talk to and the unsuccessful ones. It's like, okay, what problems are you solving? And maybe it's something super vague and it's huge. It's like, oh, we're going to improve developer experience. Okay, that's great. What does that mean? You
Yeah.
know, really simple thing. It's a pain in the butt to get an S3 bucket. Takes ages. It's annoying. Maybe our testing is a nightmare. Really simple things that you can then, now, of course, they're not necessarily simple, but specific things that you can identify as a problem and then solve. And I think something that really kind of speaks to me here, and I'm kind of curious to I guess zoom in on, is my favorite, is my term of the day right now. So I'm going to keep using it. Most of the people I talk to, of course, because we're a community, are more engineer level. They're not leadership. They're people who maybe were working in DevOps. They really like the idea of that. They're in this awesome ecosystem. They read a lot of content and like, platform is what we need to do. But they're maybe not someone who is the decision maker themselves. And I think that's where you kind of get this struggle. You, to me, seem like you were the decision maker. You were able to absorb the knowledge and then make the decisions. And thus you kind of have that blend of technical knowledge and that blend of business knowledge. But how if one of your kind of engineers came to you, how should they approach trying to convince you of a platform engineering thing or this platform thing? Maybe they're not so business minded. Maybe they're not so familiar with how they should speak kind of decision maker lingo, as I like to call it.
Yeah, I think, well, I'm going to answer it in a couple of ways. One, we started out with this idea that I just want to reinforce for everyone. One is kind of servant leadership. What can you do for your people to help them move forward and reduce friction or toil, right? If we've read the paper, we know about toil. So be curious is the first thing. I would go out and ask engineers, or engineers would start on the team. And I'm talking about an engineer who's 22 years old, right out of college, went through a very arduous process to get into the firm. And I would call him up and say, hey, you're going to work through this process at some point, and you're going to find something unbearably difficult to, to get through. And it's at that moment that I need to know what that challenge is. So having that curiosity is critical. But that curiosity also translates into the business need and to your leadership, and to be able to say, what metrics do you care about to your leaders? And they might say, well, how come we can't scale a team in a reasonable amount of time? Why does it take 6 months to get someone up to speed? And the answer tends to be, well, first we've got to onboard them. And if you're at a big company, that onboarding may take 3 weeks, 3 weeks to get someone to write a line of code. So
Mm,
one of our goals was you have to write a line of code and check it in, submit a PR on the first day. And in having that goal, whoa, that lines up a whole bunch of different expectations
mm,
throughout the engineering organization. All of those things map to business discussions with your leadership. Hey, what we're seeing today is that we can't get someone up to speed in this amount of time. And here are the high level reasons, right? As technical folk, we've got to work all the time at really talking about the value and the broad challenge, not the detail of the technology. But what we want to say is, well, this developer can't get access to infrastructure because of this policy or the way we do things. But we think we can accelerate development progress by providing this kind of solution or isolating this. And this is the exciting thing about engineering, right? Once we have a framework or some limiting factors, we can get really creative about how we engineer solutions. So that's kind of what excites me. But go to your leadership, talk about the challenges, right? Bring them not problems, but
mm,
solutions in the
mm.
as the as the old
Yeah,
adage
as the old adage
implies.
goes.
But right, here's what I'm thinking.
I mean, I like this. It's again, it's one of these things that is kind of a fundamental business practice and has been for a long time. And I notice a lot with platform engineering that what it often ends up being is unlocking oftentimes decades of experience. I mean, I had a fantastic conversation with Leah Rivers from Google where she pulled up, oh, this is the book I'm reading. And it was a book literally on like highways from the 60s and how they project managed those highways and how they worked through those organizational structures. And she's like, yeah, this is what I'm using to help answer my next platform engineering problem at Google. And I think that's something that a lot of people miss. We're so used to dealing with, oh, we're at the absolute frontier. What's the frontier knowledge? But often this really fantastic idea that you've just laid out, talk to your leadership, the people who give you the money, the people who can decide whether the platform continues, expands or not. Be like, what is the thing that you care about? In this case, it's, scale. They want to scale teams more. Like, okay, so what's the issue there? Well, the issue there is the onboarding and then breaking down into these paths. Well, what are the issues with onboarding? And then be able to break out these pieces. And there you go. Now you've gone from a platform goal of we want to scale teams and you think, oh, gosh, what does that mean? We want developer experience. What does that mean? How do you get there? To, these are, 4 or 5 or 6 or 10, or maybe 1 or 2 small things relatively that you're able to be specific on, you're able to deliver value on, and probably you're more likely able to measure those things. I mean, I love to throw this number around, but the State of Platform Engineering survey last year, 44% of platform engineers don't measure at all. And when you go and talk to them, you're like, why aren't you measuring? Oftentimes you find it's because their platform goals are something incredibly vague. They're these huge, big bucket items that if your goal goes from scale team down to onboarding time, or even to time to first commit, how long can we add a developer to the organization, to a team, and they get to do their first commit? If you're
Yeah, and
getting
I'd
that
like to
down
give
from
you
4 months to 1 day,
yeah, I'd like
yeah,
to
go
give you
ahead.
one other example. That was again, I work for a very very large organization that shall not be named for all sorts of reasons. But another example for us was developers needed to test with TLS or SSL. The process at the company was to open a ticket. And it wasn't with my team, it was with the TLS SSL team. Then you had to have business justification. You had to have sign off. And this is just for a cert to to test with, right? It's not production, it's just development, but we wanted a proper cert. That ticket, once approved, usually sat in a queue for 5 days. It ended up with someone who didn't understand why you were requesting a certificate. And it took upwards of 10 days to get a certificate for an API. This was like perfect for us. We sat down, I sat down with the team. We talked about this. We had heard about it from developers. We'd known it from our own experience. And we use Cert Manager and some other technology. And in our platform, now you just change off to on. And now you have certificates in front of your services. So think about that's the kind of impact that you take to leadership. This process took 10 days and blocked engineers from closing their sprint because they couldn't test to 3 minutes. When leadership hears of those things, then they really get on board, right? Because you can skin that 10 different ways, right? You can talk about the impact to your customer because you didn't get the release out on time, or the feature, or the embarrassment to leadership because they had to report again that they didn't complete a sprint. You can talk about the actual cost of engineers waiting around to do this thing. Yeah, maybe they can do something else, but really things backed up around this.
Mm.
And that causes a sense of frustration. Teams move fast, obviously, and they don't want to wait for this anymore. They want to get their work done and feel like they're moving forward. They don't want to have to plan a quarter in advance to have a certificate in front of their service. So really, that's the kind of mindset that you need to bring,
Yeah.
is that curious mindset, right? Go ask engineers from the most junior to the most senior. What is the one thing today that I could change that would make you leave work happy, right? What could I automate? Is it that, right? Could be something else. But you start to build your platform from there, and you'll have tremendous respect from your engineers.
Mm. I mean, that was going to be my next question. You're so good. You kind of answered it before I got there. But I would like to talk a bit more about this kind of decision path of how do you decide those things to build for, and then probably if you're talking to lots of developers, I mean, seems like you're focusing on the kind of that user research, the direct conversation point, which in my opinion is one of the best ways to go about it. Just go talk to the actual people. Sure, you can do surveys and build kind of questionnaires and stuff. Those are great. But just getting on a call and asking them about their pain is usually going to be the best way. But I'm curious, you've talked to 20, 30, 40, 50 developers, however many. Do you have 50 problems now and you're trying to pick which one's the best? How are you making that decision from those next stages?
Yeah. So, first, let's start with the conversation, right? You have to ask the hard questions and give people permission to give you really hard feedback. A
Mm.
lot of people are going to be afraid to say that, right? And so start with a conversation and your goal, right? I am in this conversation, I am here for you to improve your experience as a developer and to understand the things. Again, I use this all the time. Do you feel satisfied when you go home? Do you feel like you accomplished something? Or do you feel frustrated because you had to wait 10 days for a certificate? Or, you know, any number of things.
Mm.
But set set the groundwork for that conversation, which is, this is a safe conversation. I'm trusting you. You can beat up my team around what we're not doing well, so that
Mm.
I can hear that, right? And you have to be comfortable with asking those questions. What can we do better? How can I make you faster? How can I make you more efficient? Right?
Mm.
Without putting the work on them, right? We have to listen, take notes, have our AI do it, right? Listen for those nuggets of areas where you can build a product.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, sorry, I may have missed the other part of the
No,
question.
no, no. You
Yeah.
you nailed it. You
Okay.
got all the juice that I and I'm sure everyone listening was looking for. And I think
Okay.
it's really no surprise from the things you're saying now that my what originally kind of excited me about our conversation, the big problem that everyone has, is this. And it's no surprise, really, given your experience, given your way of thinking. I mean, that genuine curiosity, that interest, that desire to treat it like a product to help, that's not a problem for you.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have any problems. Maybe you don't, but I'm going to go out on a wild limb and assume you do have problems. So I'm curious what the problems are for the platform and the platform man uh, when the main thing is in there.
Yeah, I'll have to think about it a little bit more, but I'm going to go with I'm not sure that we think about the problems as much as you might suggest. One thing that my team did early on is really think about Simon Sinek and the infinite game. So it's definitely a book worth reading. We kind of welcome the problems. All of those problems are an opportunity. So possibly the biggest problem we had and maybe still have is the level of experience of Kubernetes administrators and how to stand up our platform. So our goal really, we've talked about engineering a lot as our customer,
Mm.
but really in these positions, I would challenge people to think about the finance team, your leadership, your SREs, and your customers if you're delivering a product. Those are all your customers as well. And so as you start to get good at talking to engineers, you really have to get good at talking to SREs. You really have to get better at talking to, depending on, what kind of funding you need, the finance teams, right? So that they understand where you're going. And we can use all sorts of resources online to get better at articulating that in effective ways for them. But I'll come back to our problem. Our problem was um, we never want to have a ring or control over what we are building, uh, in that people have to come to us for it. So I alluded earlier to kind of inner source and making this technology available to everyone in our company. So our biggest problem was simplifying a whole set of applications into Helm charts so that you could deploy this platform in your own Kubernetes cluster within an hour or so. The challenge there is how much should you simplify it? How
Mm.
much customization do you bring to it? And then how do you support it? So my perspective was we kept simplifying and simplifying and then going out and taking that to live demos and asking people to deploy, seeing where they got stuck. Most of the time they got stuck in kind of trivial Kubernetes technology and administration. So that was something we had to work through and start to get people to a baseline of Kubernetes knowledge um, and Kubernetes administration. So that was probably our biggest challenge.
I mean,
Uh,
it's interesting, and I guess it's no surprise, when I talk to people, when I write things, very rarely is it technical problems. It's cultural problems. Um, but I think in a case like yours, where you seem to really have the cultural stuff down pat, I, you seem to me very good at talking to a senior leader, but also talking to an SRE or to a developer or to an engineer. And I think that's a confidence that most teams don't have. And so their struggles end up being cultural. But if you're able to clear away all the cultural, well, then you are left with that technical part of the socio-technical. This is still a technical operation. Yes, it's
yeah,
org transformation, but there are still technical things here to figure out.
yeah. I'm going to tell people to be vulnerable. Go out there, start to learn, ask the questions, try to drop the frustration and the technical judgment. Listen, right? Don't solve the problem right there. Take the feedback, think about it, bring it back to your teams, talk about it, go back to the person who said it and say, if I could give you a system where you could make one configuration change and get an SSL certificate, does that solve a problem for you, right? Validate it over and over again so that you're solving something relatively small, but it's going to be a bigger issue for the developers. They are going to breathe a sigh of relief when that is complete. And you've just got to keep chipping away uh, at at those features.
With that beautiful, beautiful, beautiful closing statement, I will 100% be clipping it and sharing it out to everyone. Thank you
Okay.
so much, James. This has
All
been
right.
awesome.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
thank you, everybody, for watching. There'll be many more of
Right.
these.
Okay.
Bye,
Bye
everybody.
bye.